Denise Gwen, reading aloud for you from my novel, The Heartbalm Effect. Book 1 in the Medicine Women of Alaska. Chapter 3. Damn. Why'd I even offer her a position here? The pediatric wing is down this hallway to the left. The pediatric wing? She asked uncertainly. I've already had my fill of her snotty little attitude. Yes, Dr. Lavange, the pediatric wing. We treat a lot of children here. Poor indigenous children who wouldn't get any medical care at all if it weren't for this clinic. I didn't mean to imply, annoyed, he simply overrode her. Now he remembered her from the interview 6 months earlier. And as his memories of the interview flooded back into his consciousness, he really did wonder why in the world he even bothered to offer her a position at the clinic. Well, you were desperate, remember? You were desperate to find a doctor, any doctor, to help you with the management of the day-to-day operations, and she was the only one who said yes. Yes, he remembered now. She's mighty pretty, though. Those sharp blue eyes of hers, that lustrous brown hair. You were taken in by her beauty, Paul. Admit it. To be brutally honest, she did fit the exact requirements of what he found most desirable in a woman. He loved tall, slender women with blonde hair and lovely porcelain pale skin. If only she didn't have such a condescending attitude. Well, he didn't care to consider what might have happened between them because, clearly, it wasn't going to happen ever. He knew her type. Extraordinarily pretty and incredibly ambitious, too. Once a more lucrative opportunity arose, she'd grab the first plane, truck, ship, or sled and kick the snow off her heels as she fled this dull burg without a backwards glance. Dr. Lavange, we're the only resorts within 100 miles for care when a child becomes ill or injured. I see. Nurse Winter's pager went off. She looked at it. I'm sorry, but I gotta answer this. Please don't go and leave me alone with her. The doctor plastered a pleasant smile on his face as Nurse Winters hurried away, and he continued his narration from years of rote experience. We're their only recourse to health care. As you probably know by now, Dr. Lavange, this clinic's located in a remote section of Denali National Park. It's hard for some of our patients to reach this clinic, let alone the nearest hospital over 100 miles away. I understand, she said softly. Nettled, Paul turned his back to her and opened the first door to one of the children's exam rooms. He stopped with surprise at the soft weight of her hand on his left bicep. He looked down into her pleading eyes. She gazed up at him, her blue eyes liquid and full. Dr. Livingston, I'm sorry if I offended you. Well, he said uncomfortably and cleared his throat. Time seemed to stand still with the significance of this moment. Pierced to the quick, he gazed down at her with shock. As she looked up at him, so contrite, so sorrowful, he was seized with a sudden desire to grab her hand, whirl her around into his arms, and kiss those soft, lovely lips. He wanted to press himself against her, wrap his arms around his supple waist, and stop it, you fool, stop it! He needed to maintain his decorum. She wasn't going to stay here. No chance of that. No chance of them falling in love, having a life together, even though he saw such a thing with brutal clarity. He must maintain a professional distance between them. He eased away from her, and she released his arm with a sigh of regret. You may think this clinic isn't much, Dr. Lavange, and I'm certain you think you pulled the shortest straw to get called out here, because you're sure as hell acting like it, let me tell you. But you'll learn more here in a year than you'll ever learn in some big fancy hospital, so you can leave your snotty attitude at the door. Thank you very much. Wow, way too harsh, Paul. No need to be so harsh. She blinked back, the sudden tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry. I am a first-class jerk of the highest order, a first-class jerk. Oh, how he longed to wrap her up into his arms and dry those tears from her cheeks. But instead of softness and love, all he found inside him was hardness and anger. You residents, you're all alike. You come out here from your medical schools, your noses up in the air, thinking you're the best thing since sliced bread. But what you don't realize is you'll learn so much here. You'll wonder why you didn't just go to medical school here and be damned with the big hospitals. He hated himself for the words that bubbled from his mouth, but she had to know how he really felt about her goody two-shoes attitude. He had no time for it, regardless of how gorgeous she was, nor how much he was drawn to her. I'm really, really sorry if I offended you. Stop it now, Paul, before she turns around and walks right out of this place. You need her more than she needs you. Once she figures that out, and believe me, she will, she'll march straight out the door. Damn it, I'm being a jerk. Dr. Livingston? She asked. And then he did a curious thing. He fell silent and simply gazed at her, fully as if taking in the full measure of her and really seeing her for the first time. The facade of her fancy pedigree and raw ambition had fallen from her face, and she looked so young and lost and vulnerable. He swallowed down his anger and reproached himself for being such an unpleasant person. Why couldn't he give the poor girl a break? Here she was, completely out of her element. She'd gone to a tremendous amount of effort to get here, and on her first day of trying to fit in, well, he did everything in his power to drive her away. What the hell was the matter with him anyway? Well, for starters, I'm lonely. How's that? Until a year ago, I was a happily married man, hoping to start a family with my wife, when she suddenly decided she'd had enough of this clinic and of me. And now I'm alone out here, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe I shouldn't just pack it in myself and head back to the real world. This clinic was an experiment that failed, and I'm finally starting to see that. I'm a failure. I failed at my marriage, and I failed at my clinic. He cleared his throat. We serve a population of indigenous people, a tribe of Native Americans, the Tlingits, and we do it at no cost because these people have next to nothing, and if it weren't for us, their children wouldn't get any preventative care at all. I understand completely. Please forgive me. I've had a hard day, I guess you could say. Touched by her candor, he cocked his head. Care to tell me? No, I'm sorry. A moment passed between them, and her bright blue eyes blinked back tears, and he had to resist the effort to take her into his arms and kiss her, fully, reverently, and with all his pent-up desire. She brought out an animal heat in him. He didn't know where it came from, but he wanted to hold her close to him and whisper in her ear and kiss her and tell her everything was all right. She brought out all these feelings in him, and he wanted to tell her what a jerk he'd been and ask her forgiveness, but he sensed it'd be too much for her. So slowly, by degrees, He watched with misery as she finally released his arm and dropped her hands to her sides. And then, just like that, as easily as a puff of air leaves the chest, he smiled down at her. "Oh, well, sure. It's nothing much, not to speak of." And then, just like that, as easily as a puff of air leaves the chest, he smiled down at her. "Oh, well, sure, it's nothing much, not much to speak of, but let's peek inside the first examination room, shall we?" "Yes, let's." He opened the exam room door and walked inside.